So hello and thank you for joining the Journal of Chinese Medicine today. I have the pleasure of being joined by Rob Helmer. Rob originally graduated from Traditional Chinese Medicine School in Toronto, 1998, and completed his doctorate of Traditional Chinese Medicine at Pacific Rim College in Victoria. To obtain doctorate level knowledge, he learned to read medical Chinese and spent many years translating Chinese medical journal articles into English to share with others. So he has completed clinical practice internships in China, Germany, and USA. Rob is currently a professor of traditional Chinese medicine at OC-TCM in Toronto and has previously taught at a number of TCM schools in Canada and the US, and also has developed and taught postgraduate courses on insomnia, asthma, and dermatology based on his own clinical experience and research. Rob is a published author and has previously appeared in various TCM journals and also published a book by Blue Poppy Press in 2006. So Rob will be talking to us today about tips to obtain peaceful, restorative sleep in the midst of a pandemic, combining ancient wisdom and sleep science. Rob, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'd like to hand over to you.
It's great to be here with the Journal of Chinese Medicine and the journey we've been on together with the Journal of Chinese Medicine, which started about a year and a half ago with going to publish an article for the journal. And originally it was on a different subject, but with the pandemic and the rates of affecting mental emotional problems, specifically insomnia, that became the focus of my research and clinical practice. And so then this article that I've just written for the Journal of Chinese Medicine will come out in June, well, in a week or so, led into these other courses and so forth, which has led us here today, or led me here today and led you here today. So thank you for joining. I'll just share my screen. So welcome, everyone. So every living organism on the planet needs sleep. So this desire to sleep without being able to is one of the most frustrating experiences in our modern existence. This was, of course, before the pandemic, which has caused a great deal of frustration, which we'll go into. So some people will go to bed and they're going to stare up at the ceiling, can't get to sleep. Some people, so they're unable to fall asleep right away. The average person takes about 20 minutes to fall asleep, just to give you an idea of, what might be. If you're asking a patient about, how long does it take you to fall asleep? Well, it takes like 20 minutes, and you think that's pathological. No, that's, if it starts to get half hour, 45 minutes, then maybe it's a problem. They could wake up in the middle of the night with their mind racing with random thoughts and can't get back to sleep, or early in the morning, 3, 4 in the morning, they can't get back to sleep. Or they experience restless sleep due to tossing and turning throughout the night. Of course, everyone will have sleepless nights during their life, but many insomnia becomes chronic, and chronic insomnia is defined as having difficulty several times a week for several months. And this can severely disrupt a person's life and well-being. The lack of rest, of course. I don't know who's in a better mood when they don't sleep well. So it can put a damper on your mood. It can affect quality of life. And often turns sleep into individuals that are suffering from this will often feels like sleep is a chore, and they sometimes dread it. Instead, if you're sleeping well, you're looking at it as an opportunity to relieve, a relieving opportunity to rest and recover. So traditional Chinese medicine as an extension of Chinese culture has been focused on developing ways to prevent illness and cultivate health in order to nourish life and longevity for more than 2,000 years. So much of this empirical knowledge that was gained to promote healthy sleep can now be explained, understood, and supported by modern sleep research of the past 40 years. So I get excited about this type of things where it's like Chinese medicine has been studying circadian rhythm for, since the Neijing and Nanjing, and they were documenting it back then and previously. In traditional cultures. And here now we have sleep research of why you might not do something late at night and how it supports what the Chinese medicine has documented for these thousands of years. So the research is really supporting. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at, from a modern medicine point of view, what is sleep, how it works, and then also Chinese medicine point of view, a couple different angles, Yin Yang theory, liver depression, qi stagnation, and stress, and how that causes it, and how these interrelate with cortisol and melatonin and so forth, so we can understand the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which we're going to learn about. So how do these things intersect, and how do they lead us to the tips? So what are some tips that you guys tell your patients, or what are some tips for sleep? I'd love to see them, you guys to write those in the chat box now, to as a beginning step together. Like, what are some tips of how do I sleep better? Shut off the mobile and laptop for at least an hour. Yeah, electronic. No devices in the room. Visualize stimuli. Yeah. I'm going to talk about those in details. Don't have coffee later than lunchtime. Okay. We're going to talk about coffee in detail today and get to understand it more, how to use it to your benefit. We're going to talk about eat cooling food if there's heat. Anything else? Anything to do with lifestyle or time of day of stuff? Avoid naps during the day, possible. Meditation, massage, or cooling, bringing things down. Exercise, these are all great. And keep going if you have more. These are, and what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the why. Why are we saying these things? Our patients like to know the why. Go to bed at the same time every night. Thanks, Michael. So some of these things I knew as well. Then I started to look at the research of the why. Why don't we use electronics late at night? Why is exercise important? What type of exercise? When? All of these questions about our food, about these different things. So those are great. We've 8 or 10 suggestions here. Separate the bedroom from your study. Also get up at a regular time. These are all very, very good. And like I said, we have it. A lot of what I focused on in my clinical practice with counseling patients on lifestyle things were what Bob Flaws, who's a prominent teacher in Chinese medicine and writer, author, translator, and he was I would call him a friend, a mentor of mine, and I've done much study with Bob, and also translation and him helping editing my translations and so forth. And he coined the phrase, or at least I think he did, called the 3 free therapies, which is diet, exercise, and relaxation. So often when I'm in clinic, those are the 3. And then I would say that sleep is the other 4th pillar of this. And sleep, I would say since like 1997, 98, since I got involved in Chinese medicine, I would say sleep needs to be talked about more. It's something that people don't prioritize. So we're going to look at those 3 plus other things, what sleep hygiene tips. And these, of course, can be individualized for specific people to achieve sufficient sleep that is both peaceful and restorative. So it's not just enough sleep, but good quality sleep. When practiced, these have been shown to create balance within the body and mind and provide a solid foundation for a person's health. And it can be used both remedially and preventively, and it'll improve your clinical outcomes using Chinese herbal medicine and or acupuncture. So let us move further here. This is all I'm excited to share with you. This is all relatively new material because that was created for you today. And so what we're going to be working with is timing about how quickly to move through things, how slowly, and so forth. If you have any questions throughout, of course, when I ask for comments, it's great to see them. If you have a question, if you just write in caps question and then write it in the chat box, I will I'll take pauses throughout for myself, and I'll read through those before going on to the next subject. About halfway through, we will all stop and take some questions to make sure we're all on the same page. So let us begin here. It's just a little brief introduction to sleep itself, and there's a course coming up. There's an introductory in a couple weeks that maybe Charlene will give us more details about later on COVID-somnia. So there's the course I've developed for this, where we really look at cases of people that are having trouble sleeping due to the stress of the pandemic. So this is just a little bit of an introduction to sleep, to insomnia. So prior to the pandemic, there was been substantial increases of rates of insomnia and sleep medication use. And if you look at different recommendations about how much sleep does a person need, almost like everyone, whether it's the Centers for Disease Control or other sleep foundations, etc., everyone's saying basically the same thing: 7 to 9 hours of sleep needed per night. Now, in the United States, I have studies from different countries. In the United States, in 2013, and it's, like I said, progressively getting more, only 59% of people in 2013 were, according to this Gallup poll, were achieving the minimum amount of sleep. 2013, 59%. And in 1942, 84% of people were. So as you can see, in this 70-year period, all of a sudden, a lot less people are getting the minimum amount. And these people were averaging about 6.8 hours. And this was in 2013. And this is more than an hour less than it was 70 years ago. So us as humans haven't changed, but we're sleeping an hour less. And 1 out of 10 adults had chronic insomnia based on the strictest criteria. And 1 of 3 visiting a general physician had difficulty sleeping. So, these are all big statistics prior to the pandemic. And, there's a lot of research on this about the incidence of this and so forth. And of course, it's affecting children as well. They're not getting enough sleep, and adolescents, teens. And sleep's so important, it affects your cognitive functioning outcomes, your mental health, your physical health, your work performance, and safety as well. Because sleep-deprived people are less effective in making decisions, they're less creative, they suffer negative moods, more likely to experience stress or distress, they're low in work engagement, they're low in performance, they have tendency to be more obese. There's all these reasons. Greater risk of coronary heart disease, more likely to get injured, involved in vehicle crashes, and to die at an earlier age. So these are a lot of great reasons to sleep more, or get enough sleep, I should say. And I'm gonna, instead of doing all the theory and introducing tips later on, what I'm gonna do is as we go along with the theory, I'm gonna be putting in tips. So our tip number 1 is sleep is an integral component of human health. We need to start to prioritize sleep. It's that important. And even though studies show 65% of people think it contributes to their next day effectiveness, only 10% of people prioritize it. They might prioritize, binge watching a show on Netflix, or socializing over getting enough sleep, for instance. So about how life choices and so forth. So really your today started for you last night when you went to bed. So, last night's sleep affects your today. And sleep loss deprivation adversely affects the way we function in our everyday lives. And then so healthier choices that prioritize sleep help a person physically heal, recover from, and prevent illness, helps you deal with stress. If you have a good night's sleep, you're more likely to be able to deal with what arises in your life the next day. It increases your immunity, helps you solve problems, helps you keep memories, and it improves motor skills. So they've done different research on learning and memory and academics and so forth that show it doesn't matter how much you study, if you don't get good sleep, you're not going to be able to consolidate those memories. And there's different levels of sleep. Now, there's a few things that I won't talk about today. And even though they are important, it doesn't really affect what choices we make for tips. And it doesn't really, in my opinion, affect our clinical practice so much. And the two things is what they call your chronotypes is the first thing. It's the first thing, and I forgot. Oh, yes, and then there's different stages of sleep. So these different stages of sleep, we're going to mention them briefly about deep wave, or slow wave sleep or deep sleep, REM sleep, rapid eye movement or non-rapid eye movement. You can read about this and research it yourself. We won't be talking about it. And then your chronotype is whether you tend to go to bed a little later and sleep in, or you tend to go to bed early, like the early bird, gets the worm and you wake up earlier. But it should be relatively in a particular range. And they just studied like different genetics, different personality types do better if they sleep later and so forth. And this can change throughout our life. For instance, a teenager tends to go to bed later and sleep in. So they've done research to show if you allow children of that age to start school an hour later, they do much, much better. So we're not going to look at that so much. And there's different things online where you can figure out. This could be very important to help someone. Sometimes, however, it can be an excuse. It's like, oh, I'm a night hawk. So night hawk might mean you go to bed at 11:30, not 2:30 or 3 in the morning. So sometimes it doesn't line up with the yin yang or circadian rhythm, and it can be used as an excuse or bad habit. So I'm just going to give a general thing about time to wake, time to go to bed that fits most people. Now, if you're sleeping less than 7 hours, it will affect your health. There's nobody that can just, get lack of sleep for their life and still be healthy. It will eventually catch up with you. And as I mentioned, lower risk of heart disease, lower risk of diabetes and obesity, improved mental health, less depression and anxiety because poor sleep is connected to these, better focus, productivity. And the one thing about sleep right now that they're also finding is that sleep, and especially different levels of sleep, can clean toxins out from the brain. This is modern medical research. And what it's finding is it can clean these toxins, and there's links to this in the information. It cleans out the toxins of the brain, so it gets rid of the old, so to speak. And by doing so, the people would have less incidence of Alzheimer's. So this is really important, that the way that the body cleans itself and recharges itself, it's not just about the next day, it's about long-term health. So these are real things that you can do. You can take some herbs to help memory and so forth, or you can get sleep. So these are really important lifestyle choices. So going back to the introduction, there is a study they were looking at electronic files of around 236,000 COVID patients 6 months after their diagnosis that lived, of course. And 34% or 1/3 of these had neurological or psychiatric outcomes still. So what we're talking when we talk about COVID-somnia, which is insomnia due to the pandemic, we're talking about COVID patients themselves, but we're also talking about rates that have increased in the general population. And this is due to stress, basically, or disruption of life, fear, and isolation. Research, there is tons of research, and I wrote the article, and then there's more research. I do a course on it, and then there's more research. And then I was putting together the database, and there was more research. So there's so much research about how choices in different countries and isolation and shutdowns and how they can affect. And the course, we go into much more detail about that. Greater than 50% of people, and this with some Canadian research, have severely disrupted sleep. And other research showed 70% of people in the 35 to 44-year-old had difficulty sleeping or severely disrupted sleep. So now we went from 1/3 of people, and now we're up to like over 50%. And then in a certain age group, you think of this 35 to 44-year-old, which I am involved in for the next week until I turn 45 next week. Now 70%, and those are probably working, young families, schools have been shut down here in Canada and other countries, and the stress of that. That's what I think of that kind of age group. The bad news is these rates have yet to reach their peak and will outlive the pandemic. And there is different research that's included in the journal article as well in the course we talk about, where, for instance, being in isolation for 10 days can affect your psychological health for up to 3 years after, if it's only for 10 days socially isolated. And if you can imagine, we've been in more isolation than that. So what we're doing here is talking about this today, and well, the pandemic might end, vaccinations seems to be helpful, and it might ease, but what happens is sometimes the rhythm of the person's sleep schedule has now been thrown off, and it might not come back by itself. And these mental health problems like depression, anxiety, insomnia, etc., might long outlive the pandemic. So we might see a patient 15 years from now, and they might say, oh, I've had trouble sleeping for 15 years. And you start to talk about, as we do with our patients, what happened when it started. And they could say, oh, it started at the pandemic. And so we're going to see generation of people that are affected by this. So we have to prepare ourselves about how can we assess, diagnose, and treat these patients to help them. And as these conditions become more chronic, it might change which patterns present and how we need to adapt our treatment. And that's what the information and my research and the further courses will discuss more in detail. So tip number 2 is to avoid medications or sleep medications. And this is kind of a brave thing to say. However, if you want to, I was telling a group last week I was teaching, if you want to become depressed or a downer day, is to read the research on sleep medications. Remember when I was doing research on bedwetting and so forth, when you start to look at, often we're presented by modern medical scientists or doctors, well, where's your research that Chinese medicine works? Sometimes often when you start to look at what research they've done on the medications, you start to see that maybe it isn't as effective as they'd like you to believe, and there's more side effects. And that's no more apparent than in sleep medications. And once again, there's going to be lots of links to different sites and research that you can look at this. But there is well-documented side effects, and they're limited effectiveness. When I'm saying the limited effectiveness, half of the results that sleep medications get are proven to be found from placebo effect, actually. And some of these strong sleep medications might help a person only sleep 20 minutes longer a night. But it doesn't support naturalistic sleep, so the sleep quality isn't as good, and there's severe side effects. So for instance, some research shows that if you have 132 doses of hypnotic drugs per year, so basically you're using it every 3 days, let's say, there's a 35% increase in cancer risk, and there's a 5-fold jump in their risk of death compared to those not prescribed these drugs. So, and even in people that only use it every few weeks, they're more likely to die. It's not like there's these little side effects. These are huge side effects. It'll affect your ability. It stays in your system for a while, so it can affect your ability, like you're impaired driving the next morning. So that's part of the increase in death rates. but cancer rates and so forth. So a lot of these things have these warnings, and they're not safe, and they're best only a short term. So no more than 2 weeks. It's the most common treatment provided by medical doctors. The statistics show and studies show that there's increasing rates of use. Some research, this is all pre-COVID, there was more than 8% of adults using at least 4 times a week in the United States. And there's higher use in women and with increasing age. So for instance, 13% of women 45 years and older are using these medications. 20% are using over-the-counter pharmaceuticals. 20% are using natural sleep aids. And one of the interesting studies I found that came up due to the pandemic effect was in the United States, where there was one other research actually, and we have a few Canadians here, in the eastern part of Canada, and in one of the provinces, New Brunswick, in the Maritimes here in Canada. They were showing, this was 5 or 6 years ago, that 25% of senior citizens, people over 65 years old, were on sleep medications. They're the most at risk for side effects. You know, these medications can cause dizziness, they're more apt to fall, and so forth. And even though at the time incidences of insomnia were about the same, with these certain new medications coming out, the incidence of prescriptions increased 4 times. So even though the rates of insomnia were the same, 4 times the amount of medications were starting to be prescribed. And in this particular province, 25% of people were taking it. And as we age, we don't sleep as well. So, you know, they were over-medicating, or are over-medicating. And these other factors, these are severe side effects. So if there's other ways or tips that we can do to avoid using or cut down on sleep medications, the better. So in February 2020, in the United States, was the first confirmed death of COVID. On March the 1st, there were a total of 66 cases of COVID in the United States, or confirmed cases. Despite this low numbers, from mid-February to mid-March of that year, there was a 14.8% increase in sleep medications, according to this data from this Express Scripts, which looks at the prescriptions that were given. The anti-anxiety medications increased by about 33%, and antidepressants increased by 23%. Was this caused by COVID? No, it was caused by people's emotional reaction to fear and stress. In the course, we go into much more detail about this. We're going to talk a little bit about it in conjunction with cortisol later on. So despite these low numbers at the time, it was already increasing. So statistics were already showing that. A year later, I don't know how the exact today's date, but when I was putting this together, I looked at what was it a year after. And cases had reached 28 million in the United States, and deaths had surpassed 500,000 a year later. So this stress of the pandemic, and then there was multiple lockdowns and travel restrictions and loss of work and so forth. So I imagine that the rates of insomnia and other things and medication use have only increased. Now we know these medications are very addictive, which can cause their own problems. So what I'm saying is, we're going to see maybe people coming off these medications, people having side effects. We're going to see more chronic insomnia, and we're going to probably, in my clinic for sure, have more people showing up asking for help. So if we can avoid these with these tips or treatment, great. And if we can work on improving, increasing our knowledge so that we can help more people, even better. And so that's what's inspiring me to share today. There are other medications that can affect if a person is having trouble sleeping. So antidepressants, ADHD medication, beta blockers, over-the-counter cold and allergy drugs, and various steroid medications. These are all known to adversely affect sleep quality. So if they are taking them, it might be the time of day that they take them. So you should inquire about this. So antidepressants, ADHD, beta blockers, etc. Okay, so we're going to look at sleep from Chinese medicine point of view, and then look at tips that relate to sleep. So sleep and wakefulness is a yin-yang pair in Chinese medicine. So humans are conscious through their senses, and the mind is awake when there's yang qi is sufficient and moves upward in the body. Yang qi is produced by our daily consumption of food and drink, combined with the air we breathe. Sleep is this sinking of yang back downwards and inwards to be enfolded and nurtured by yin. This yang being able to sink back downwards is because we've expended, it's been expended by all of our daily activities. Each equals we no longer have enough to remain conscious and need to sleep. So we use this yang or our qi up during the day, and it tires us out, right? And then we need to sleep. So, and this is very simple, but it helps us understand the tips that we're going to use about balancing this yin and yang. So even though it's simplistic, it's important. So during sleep, the yin blood nourishes us. It heals and recuperates the yang qi we've used up. So it helps us recharge our battery. Now, when we're younger, we're making more qi and blood than we use up, right? And that's stored as essence in the body. As we start to age, starting in the mid 30s, especially in a female, we start to age. And I say that because, a female menstruates each month, they can give birth, breastfeeding, and so they're using more qi and blood, and their spleen's a bit weaker, so we start to make less qi and blood. And so we start to borrow from our essence at that point. So we have this buildup of energy and storage, but eventually, and if we get enough sleep, if we're too yang and active and not getting enough yin rest sleep, then we kind of burning the candle at both ends. We use up our essence and our yin, and it stresses the system out. So after a restful sleep, our yang should be recharged, and we wake back up again, ready to meet the challenges and activities of the day before us. So healthy sleep equals sound, restful, and not disturbed by excessive or scary dreams. Normal dreaming in Chinese medicine does not disrupt sleep, and it shows that our shen, or our spirit, is relatively calm and quiet. So sleep and wakefulness are this yin-yang pair in Chinese medicine. So sleeping at night during this most yin time of day, and being awake and active during the day, or when yang is at its highest, is a simple example of how this light-related circadian rhythm is observed and applied in Chinese medicine. We'll talk about the circadian rhythm later on, but the Chinese and different first peoples of North America, and other traditional cultures were following this circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm in modern research and science is really of the human being is only in the last 40 years, since the 70s, late 60s maybe. They were noticing in the 1800s that some plants were affected by sunlight and nighttime of closing and opening up. And they were making scientific observations of those. But as for human beings, this wasn't paid much attention to. And so it's created this whole, looking at the chronotypes of different, people and these different research and so forth, which we'll go into later, has been a big thing. But in Chinese medicine, this relates to the yin yang. So the fact that our body's yang qi comes upward and outward around daybreak and retreats back downward and inward after the sun goes down is due to our body's qi being influenced by the larger qi of the external universe. So the sun in Chinese medicine can be called the Taiyang, or the supreme yang in Chinese. Its rising each morning up is seen as the growth of yang qi in the world at large. And at noon, this yang qi reaches its extreme and begins to descend and retreat again. And we'll look at modern research and how sleep science and how that lines up. Therefore, the ruling qi of the day is yang, which grows from sun up to noon, and declines from noon to sundown, while the ruling chi of the night is yin, which grows from sundown to midnight. That's an interesting word, midnight. It's going to be like in the middle of your sleep, midnight, and declines from midnight to sunup. Thus, the body's yin and yang also follow suit. So a lot of the tips we're going to talk about now is how do we live in balance with the yin and yang, right? What are some of these tips from modern medical or science, sleep science, prove this yin yang? So let's look at a few tips. So one of the main things you can do, and one of the most important things that sleep specialists will say, is maintain a consistent sleep and wake schedule. And there is research that you will be provided, but when you're maintaining, when you're choosing these healthier behaviors, so if you maintain a consistent sleep-wake schedule and you have regular sleep, then you're more likely to, and they've proven this through research, you're more likely to make healthier dietary choices. You're more likely to exercise. So as we know with our patients, if sleep can be this thing, if we get sleep consistency, it can help put other choices in place. You know, maybe you're not as tired, so then you drink less coffee or you eat less sugar, etc. So we regulate the body's circadian rhythm. By having a regular, consistent sleep-wake schedule, it regulates the body's circadian rhythm or internal clock. It's highly beneficial for a person's overall health and well-being. And from TCM point of view, it promotes this naturalistic sleep by following the ebb and flow of yin and yang. If we look at this, the optimal time to go to sleep is probably between 9 and 11 p.m. each night, and wake between 6 and 8 a.m. Of course, and that will give us our 7 to 9 hour window of sleep for individuals. And of course, it can be a little bit on each side of that, but as a general rule, this is it. And of course, it can change via the season. But these are some good markers. So if you're going to bed at 10 and you're waking up at 5:30, then you can still get your 7.5 hours of sleep if that's what that individual needs. People that have had varied bedtimes that vary by more than 30 minutes are, they're showed to have a lower dietary quality, higher alcohol consumption, higher sedentary sitting time during the day, more frequent insufficient sleep, and poor overall pattern of lifestyle behaviors. So once I said, so if you're looking, what is the thing that you can do the most is have a regular sleep-wake schedule. So that includes, weekends, and there's a myth that you can catch up on sleep. So if you have lack of sleep during the week, you can catch up on weekend by having more sleep. But this is actually proven to be untrue. And you're actually putting yourself in jet lag each week by doing that, by changing it, altering it. Just like when we have the seasonal daylight saving times change, it affects people greatly. Like by affecting it by an hour, there's increased rates of, death. I think it's by 20%, heart problems, etc., all within the first few days after the time change, just by changing for an hour. So if we're doing that to ourselves, it puts the body under stress. It changes. If the body knows what to expect, it's less stressful. All right. So it disturbs the circadian rhythm, and poor sleep, often physical and mental fatigue results. Tip number 4 to do with balancing the yin and yang: avoid traveling across time zones and shift work. Shift work, they say that they're going to start to put medical warnings on shift work, is that it's causes health problems, basically. Increased rates of death and cancer, etc. It's not healthy. So I know some people do it, but it isn't healthy. It hasn't been ever shown to be healthy or normal. And once again, we're going against the yin yang of drastically changing things. Of course, people, they might have to travel occasional, but traveling and switching time zones frequently is not healthy for them, and neither is shift work. And there's some research that are provided for that. Tip number 5 is create at night a yin sleep environment. So what does a yin sleep environment mean? It means cool, dark, and quiet. So they've done different research about where there's a lot of things with this research about what temperature you should be, what temperature the room should be. Where we'll look at hot baths or foot soaks later on that some people use. But the sleep environment itself is cool, dark, and quiet. And your sleep actually, your temperature fluctuates throughout the day and through the night as you're going through various stages of sleep. But they say to set your thermostat between 65 and 69 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 to 25 degrees Celsius. 18 to 20 degrees Celsius or 65 to 69 degrees Fahrenheit. And there's lots of research on this. The cooler your sleep environment, the better you sleep, basically. And what this is when the body starts to cool down, it tells the body that it's time to sleep. So if you drop the temperature down in your house an hour or two before bed, the body gets the signal and it can release more melatonin. It helps with the hormone balance that it's time for sleep. So it's like you're in a cave, cool, dark, and quiet, this dark cave. And they do different studies about, and there's some research as well that I will be sharing with you about train sounds at night, or just a little bit of light in the room. Or they did different things where they would flash bright lights a couple times in the night, and they show that increased the incidence of depression much more. So cool, dark, and quiet, and of course there's all different masks and earplugs and so forth to help depending where you're living. But they looked at effects of in the research, effects of road traffic, railway noise, as I said, and how much noise, even though you might not wake, affects your quality of sleep or brings you out of the deep level of sleep that you need. So cool, dark, and quiet, but think of it from a yin perspective, yin and yang perspective. I want to support the yin. So that brings us to the next, which is establish a relaxing yin bedtime routine. So this could be different pre-sleep rituals, and it's just basically showing the body that it's time for sleep. So this could be a routine of some music or relaxation, meditation, prayer, body cooling, which we'll talk about later, Tai Chi yoga. We'll talk about exercise later and a few tips from now as well. But something more relaxing, more yin in nature. So if we see all these things, they're more yin, they're more relaxing, they're more calming versus a yang time of day. And like I said, there is research on music, there's research on Tai Chi, yoga, I'm providing you with research on that. The next tip, number 7, is to eliminate all activities from your bedroom except for sleep and sex. When we're, scrolling through social media on the phone, discussing major life decisions, catching up on work, all in bed, watching TV, this is our body then and mind associate the bedroom with other activities instead of just associating with sleep or sex. And so this fixating worry about the stresses of the day, even subconsciously, can be enough to wake a person from slumber and keep them awake during the night. Different research shows do you check your phone when you first wake up in the morning, or your computer? First thing you do, like when the first 10, 15 minutes. If you do that, research shows that you actually create anxiety that allows your sleep not to be as restful. So if you waited an hour and a half and built in that time where you didn't check right away, you'd actually sleep better. So having these things very close by, or the lights in the room, affect our ability to sleep. So for our mind, that's why later on when we talk about if you can't sleep, get up. Because if you start associating your bed with not sleeping, then you won't sleep as well. So these are all habits we've developed in modern society, but they're not healthy for our sleep. And research shows this and supports this. So next, we're going to talk about daily morning light. So on the opposite end of yin is the yang. So as the sun is rising up, the Tai Yang is rising up, research shows if we get the daily morning light, we're going to talk about the circadian rhythm later on, but I'm putting it in this category of yin and yang because it has to do with the yang as well. So if you have natural morning light, or they even did research with like bright lights at that time of day, it's a real physiological human need, they found out. So if you wake up with that, then what it does is it creates greater alertness, and stimulating that yang portion of having morning light actually helps you sleep better at night. And people are less stressed, less depressed, if they're getting the morning light, and then they sleep better at night. And this is all due to the melatonin from a science point of view. From a Chinese medicine point of view, we look at it as yin yang, so supporting the yang. Now, so you shouldn't wear sunglasses, for instance, you're going out for a morning walk. Now, if you're going for a late afternoon walk out in the sun, maybe you do wear the sunglasses so you don't take as much light or yang into the body that might stimulate you so you can't sleep at night. But in the morning, let that sun in. And we'll talk about exercise next, and if you exercise also in the sun is even better. So next is exercise. Hopefully I'm not going too quickly. Is it okay, everyone, the speed? Okay, good. You'll be able to, okay, great. Thank you. I wouldn't go any quicker, but I can slow down a little bit if you'd like. And I am seeing your questions here, which are great. Regarding the sleep medications, yeah, the benzos, but any sleep medication really, you have to look at each one individually, but overall they have severe side effects, and they also have limited use. So sometimes it would be, oh, this sleep medication help people fall asleep 20 minutes quicker, and this one only 8 or 9 minutes quicker. So, but overall 20 minutes to take such a strong medication to get to bed quicker is not enough it doesn't, it's minimal benefit for great risk. So yeah, you can look at individual medications. I'm kind of giving you a general overall, but all of them from the research I've done are not good, basically. There is a website called, it was a doctor put out this website, and it's all research based. It's called Sleeping Pills Kill, I think is the name of it. And he's trying to bring awareness to all of these things. Other sleep specialists say that they want to do a study to, specifically on cancer risks of sleep medications, but because of the known associated risk to cancer and mortality, it's unethical to run the study. That's how severe it is. It's not like these, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I encourage you greatly to look up the research yourself. It's pretty convincing. You don't have to look very far or very deep, and it's an educational piece for us and our patients. Yeah, we can talk about cannabis. I'll talk about marijuana, specifically smoking it later on in the thing. And the chronotype, yeah, I'll talk about the suprachiasmatic mechanism as well. Yeah, and they look at these different chronotypes as well, and we can look at it slightly different. I just don't want the chronotypes to be an excuse for poor sleep hygiene and let it go too far. Now, the interesting thing about chronotypes is in societies that, let's say, were sleeping outside, that were more susceptible to lions attacking them. For instance, our DNA was kind of set up where some people went to bed early and woke earlier. Some people went to bed later and slept in later. And this allowed them as a group, as a tribe, as a village to not be susceptible for as long at night. Okay, because they weren't as susceptible at night so they might be susceptible for 3 hours where most people are asleep versus, being susceptible for 8 hours. All right, so it's kind of built into our DNA that people sleep at different times, but that doesn't mean that, sleeping at 4 a.m. and just sleeping into noon is healthy, or being on shift work. So you can't ignore that that's not normal and not part of yin yang. So I want to balance sleep science with Chinese medicine, which is go to bed, sleep at night when it's yin time. And if you ever gone camping for a long period of time and there isn't much to do when it gets dark, I have, then it's like you start to get in a natural rhythm of waking earlier and going to bed. So I think our lifestyle has created this thing where we're not living as healthy. So exercise, if there's something that you can do during the day, we talked about morning light, but if there's something that you can do in the day that improves your sleep, so the daytime behavior most associated with better sleep is exercise. People who exercise regularly sleep better at night. And the more vigorously you exercise, the more you benefit. So the relationship between exercise and sleep is reciprocal. So you exercise, you sleep better, you exercise. Because you have more energy. So it improves your sleep quality, it improves your overall amount of time you spend asleep, and the amount of time you spend in slow wave deep sleep, which is the recovered, helps the sleep that recovers. So exercising late at night out, however, can be too stimulating, too yang. That's why I have it in this yin yang thing. And it can confuse your natural rhythm. Exercise lating increases your adrenaline, stimulates brain activity. It also elevates your core body temperature for 4 to 5 hours. So it's recommended that you finish exercise 2 to 3 hours before sleep. So it's the most important thing you can do. And they've done other research that shows morning exercise. If you exercise in like later in the day and in the morning, you'll get more benefit from exercising in the morning. So exercise, super important. Not too late at night. It could keep you up. Some people it might not affect, but some people it will. And it can throw off your circadian rhythm. And it helps us get rid of release cortisol and hormones, adrenaline. So that is very healthy for us, but if it's done too late, it can affect our ability to relax and fall into yin sleep. So once again, going back to yin and yang, more yin, cool, dark, etc., and then more yang during the yang time of day, exercise, morning light, and this way we can balance the yin and the yang. And this also has to do with sleep science as well. All right, I think this is a good time to, is there any questions? As we're kind of halfway through the tips, halfway through the talk, we're gonna go into this 2-process model of sleep regulation. We got quite a bit of stuff to do. Is there any questions about the material covered so far? Okay, let's move on. So from modern medicine point of view, we need to understand, or we should understand, the 2-process model of sleep regulation. Sleep-wake homeostasis, called process S, and the circadian process, called process C. So since the origin of life on Earth, behavior and physiology have been influenced by the rotation of the planet. As a result, a biological circadian timing rhythm evolved that enabled organisms to anticipate daily environmental changes rather just reacting to them. So these timing systems in the body involve internal pacemakers that run separately from environmental cycles, but can be entrained to the 24-hour cycle. So in humans, this is apparent in the timing of sleep is heavily regulated by the circadian clock. However, sleep homeostatic mechanisms also have an influence on the depth and maintenance of sleep. So in the early 1980s, the Swiss sleep researcher Alexander Borbély brought forward the idea that a 2-process model determines the main aspects. And so he had these two that were combined together. And so since that time, this two-process model of sleep cycle has been applied to understand sleep regulation in modern medicine and is one of the most often used to conduct sleep research. So we might look at how alcohol affects sleep-wake homeostasis, or coffee, or exercise, or medications, etc. So these are the two processes that they use with sleep research. So this is important to understand why the tips they give and also how they're approaching things with medication. So the first one we're going to talk about is our sleep-wake homeostasis. And this is an internal biochemical system that operates like a timer, generating sleep pressure or drive. So this is basically observed as the need to sleep after a certain time awake. So this represents what reminds us that we need to sleep. You know, what's the bodily process that reminds us humans that we need to sleep? And there's this sleep promoting chemical called adenosine. And this signals the brain that the body is tired and in need of rest. So the longer we're awake, this builds gradually the longer we're awake. So it's building up this pressure to feel sleepy. The more it accumulates, the stronger desire for sleep. So this is a neurotransmitter produced in the brain. It's a byproduct of metabolism. So it's a breakdown of the depletion of ADP in the brain. So similar to the concept of Qi and TCM, ATP obtains chemical energy from the breakdown of food molecules and releases it to fuel other activities or cellular processes. So similar to Qi, we have Qi build up in the body, and the more we use Qi, the more we feel we're becoming tired and need to sleep. So the same thing, this adenosine in modern medicine is thought of as the homeostatic accumulator of the need to sleep. The longer you're awake, the longer, if we don't do something else, and we're going to talk about that next, this adenosine builds. We're going to talk about a few tips now that affect adenosine. If there's like three things that people do that they take in there or consume that affect sleep the most, are alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine. So we're going to talk about those. They can affect the sleep homeostasis, which I just talked about. They can affect the next thing we're going to talk about, which is the circadian rhythm. But those are the three things you're going to need to look at if people are having trouble, or things that they can do to improve their sleep. So avoiding alcohol before sleep. So alcohol is a central nervous system depressant, and it causes brain activity to slow down. So it has a sedative effect, and it induces feelings of relaxation and sleepiness. So it is used as one of the most commonly used over-the-counter sleep aids. So people use it to help them fall asleep, and they might get in a habit of it. However, excessive consumption of alcohol has been linked to poor sleep quality, and alcoholics, either both during drinking periods and stopping drinking alcohol, suffer from a multitude of sleep disruptions. And this manifests as profound insomnia, excessive daytime sleepiness, and altered sleep architecture, which means they're not moving through the different levels of sleep. Alcohol is known to disrupt sleep homeostasis, to cause disruption, causing wakefulness in the second half of sleep. So if you're a healthy non-alcoholic and you occasionally have a drink, and it might help you fall asleep better. And if you don't consume too much, it might not affect your second half of sleep. But basically it helps you fall asleep and go into deeper levels of sleep, but that later on in the night causes more wakefulness and restless sleep, and the quality is worse. So it actually negates that benefit. Now, this alcohol to help fall asleep, the body becomes accustomed to this in about 3 or 4 days, research shows. So even though a person does it occasionally, it will work. If you're relying on it every night, it actually does not work. It actually produces worse sleep. So some people will have this perception of, oh, it helps me fall asleep, but actually research shows that it makes it worse. And we'll talk about marijuana later, but it has a similar effect, but it even has a worse effect on rapid eye movement sleep. And there is research I contained which shows that it doesn't help you sleep again. It gives a perception that you relax and you go to sleep, but affects the quality of it. And earlier you start smoking marijuana or pot or weed or whatever you want to call it, the more likely you are. You know, it also works, what works for different patients. I have a senior patient now. She used to wake up between 1, 3 in the morning. She's a very livery person. And she used to always wake between 1 and 3. She now makes pot cookies. She has half a cookie every night, whether it's placebo or night, she sleeps through every night. And so she does need to relax and calm down, and she actually does that, and she sleeps fine, and it resolved her problem she had for many years. So it can be beneficial. I wouldn't use Huma Ren. I would use other herbs for it in Chinese medicine. And I wouldn't prescribe, me personally, CBD. I just practice Chinese medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. So as I mentioned, people can rapidly develop tolerance to the sedative effects of alcohol. And alcohol interacts with sleep deprivation and sleep restriction to exacerbate daytime sleepiness and alcohol-induced performance impairments the next day. It can affect the central pacemaker to alter circadian functioning, which we're going to talk about in detail. It can make sleep apnea worse. And so alcohol has what they call a half-life of 4 hours. And this is important to understand the half-life of medications and drugs and alcohol, nicotine, caffeine. Half-life of ethanol or alcohol is about 4 to 5 hours. So it means 4 to 5 hours after you have it, half of it has left your system, which means actually 8 to 10 hours before it's completely left your system. So if alcohol is affecting a person's sleep, you would say don't have it 8 to 10 hours before sleep. So one 2018 study compared sleep quality among subjects who consumed different amounts of alcohol, and the findings were as follows for the sleep quality. In low amounts, less than 2 servings per day for men or women, or 1 serving per day for men, and 1 serving, less than 1 serving per day for women, it affected by 9.3%. Moderate amounts, 2 drinks a day, 1 drink per woman, 24%. And then high amounts, more than 2 drinks a day or 1 per day. So let's say a female has 10 drinks per week, it affects it by 39.2%. So asking your patients how much they drink and so forth is affecting, or if you're helping a person with sleep and then they all of a sudden, they're doing well with treatment and all of a sudden they don't sleep well. I have a patient that I present in the course who has COVID insomnia or trouble sleeping during the pandemic for the year, and started treatment, was doing very well, and then they were like, oh, I didn't sleep well, and then I start to ask them what happened, and they're like, oh, I had a few drinks that day, and they don't drink that much, but it affected their sleep instantly. So you'll see this come up in clinic. You know, Sun Tzu Miao said it's 30% nursing, 30% doctor, 70% nursing. Nursing meaning what the patient does. Often when the patient gets worse, it's something the patient's done. So asking certain questions and finding out about their habits are really important to have success and to educate your patient. But you can very easily create your own through the research I gave you, through the tips I gave you. You can create a handout to give patients about these different tips, and you can customize it. You can pick 3 or 4 that are important for your particular patient and their constitution and patterns. Avoiding nicotine. This is tip number 11. So, especially close to bedtime. So its impact on sleep is more severe than other stimulants, even more severe than cocaine, which was surprising. It's felt within 10 seconds of taking a hit of nicotine. And having nicotine causes the person to wake up and feel alert. So it reduces the amount of time in REM sleep and contributes to problems falling asleep if used too close to bedtime. It stimulates adrenaline, elevates heart rate and breathing. And if it's present in the body, it stimulates the release of several neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, gamma, etc. And these changes of fluctuation in these chemicals messengers can affect a person's sleep-wake cycle. Nicotine has a half-life of 1 to 2 hours, meaning it'll be present for up to 4 hours after being consumed. Because of this, it increases your sleep latency, which means how long does it take you to fall asleep. It causes the sleep to be more fragmented and reduce sleep efficiency. The overall amount of sleep that you have less is 43 minutes less per night. So we're talking about these heavy medications that produce 21 minutes extra a night. And here, so you could smoke a cigarette and take a sleep medication. Both are not good for your health in many ways. And, smoking cancels out the effect, basically, in a theoretical, of course, there need to be research exactly on that. But research separately shows 43 minutes less. This is one of the most important things. And it could be just if you're going to smoke, don't smoke. What time of day? Once again, from a Chinese medicine point of view, are these a yang stimulant? It's very yang in nature. Decreased slow wave sleep and difficulty getting up in the morning and increased daytime sleepiness. Well, then the smoker becomes the coffee drinker, right? So these are oops, I thought there was one more thing on nicotine. I guess not. So that's nicotine. Caffeine. So caffeine takes effect within, don't worry, I have good news later. No, it's not all bad news, taking away all your vices. Limit caffeine intake. It takes effect within 15 to 20 minutes of being consumed. It has a half-life, means stays in the body. Half of it will stay in the body for 5.7 hours. So it stimulates the production of adrenaline, raises your heart rate, and increases your breathing and brings on a state of increased vigilance and alert. If it's consumed too close to bedtime, it can throw a person's entire circadian rhythm off. It blocks the adenosine receptors. So basically what it does is that sleep pressure is building through adenosine, it blocks it or it pauses it. So it blocks out this sleep pressure building up and it causes you to be alert. But what happens is when the caffeine wears off, that adenosine pressure is still building, it's just not felt by the body. And then you get a caffeine crash because all this pressure is built up. And now when the caffeine is released, you start to feel that pressure and you feel like, oh, I'm so tired. And people then reach for more caffeine, basically. Caffeine intake also elevates cortisol levels to the same levels that stress do. So you take the caffeine and it actually causes the body stress. Coffee accounts for 54% of the caffeine consumption in the world and tea for another 43%. On a daily basis, 85% Americans use caffeine products. So it's important to find out what they're taking. They're more likely to be taking it. And the average daily consumption of caffeine by adults is about 300 milligrams per person, which is about 3 times higher than the world average. But only half of the consumption in England and Sweden, where there's heavy tea consumption, it could be double that, the amount of caffeine. So just don't look at coffee, look at other things. These energy drinks, as well as tea and chocolate and so forth. In the research, you'll find different things. But if coffee is consumed in the one study 6 hours before bed, it can reduce your sleep time by 1 hour. So some people think, oh, I can have coffee and I can still fall asleep. It still affects your sleep quality and the amount of sleep you get. And it still can affect your circadian rhythm, which might not affect you tonight, but it'll affect you the next day. So it really does have an effect. If you have it within 3 hours of sleep, then it changes your circadian rhythm, which we're going to talk about in detail next, by 40 minutes. It delays it. If you combine coffee with bright lights, it can, let me just see it will delay it by an hour and 45 minutes. An hour and 45 minutes. You have coffee, bright lights, an hour and 45 minutes, your circadian rhythm, the natural circadian rhythm is delayed, which then affects the next day and it throws everything off. So it's very important, to understand this. I remember this one patient I was seeing, and they would have one coffee a day, and they would, they were a late sleeper. They were a student of Chinese medicine. They go to bed around 12:30 to 2:30. They'd wake up around 9 o'clock, 8:30. And so I was doing a Zoom call, intake with them the one day, and they would say, oh, I have this ice coffee, caffeine drink, and I have it one a day in the morning. And so I'm trying to work with other lifestyle things, but she has difficulty falling asleep. And the one day I was talking to her around 3 or 4, and she was drinking it, but she was drinking it, sipping it throughout the day, and she was still drinking a bit of it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, some days she'd get to sleep right away, and other days she would have delayed, and then she might be very sensitive to caffeine. And if caffeine is in the system for 5.7 hours as the half-life, that means up to 12 hours later, caffeine can still be in your system. So we talk about, well, I'm not going to drink coffee after 2 o'clock. Well, if you're going to bed at 11 o'clock, then it's still like half of it or a quarter of it or a third of it is still in your system, and you might have trouble sleeping. And older adults are more susceptible to caffeine-induced problems. So after caffeine's absorbed into the body, it efficiently distributed through the whole body and it crosses the blood barrier. It can negatively affect your ability to get to sleep, your efficiency, and if you're satisfied or not with your sleep, reduce the amount of slow wave sleep, and it leads to interrupted sleep that can cause sleep deprivation, which can affect your morning and so forth, your performance, problem solving, emotion regulation. So remember, caffeine fits nicely into these receptors, the adenosine, and prevents adenosine from doing its job. So now you understand it. And from Chinese medicine point of view, it's like caffeine is very yang, up and out, can make you feel good, but can cause damage to the body in the process. So what's the best time to drink coffee? So don't consume caffeine as soon as you wake up in the morning. So what happens, we're going to talk about cortisol level, but your cortisol levels naturally go up as this awaking process. So if you drink caffeine, you're not allowing this natural process to take place. So you should, and other research shows that 1 to 2 hours after waking is the best time. I would argue 9:30 to 11 a.m. is the best time to drink your coffee. You have that natural cortisol going upwards, and then it dips a bit. And at that time you have your coffee. You have it early enough in the day that it doesn't affect your nighttime sleep. So that's kind of the best, when's the best time to get the most out of your buzz. If you start drinking caffeine when you wake up at 6:30 and 7 in the morning, you have a couple cups before your natural cortisol, it won't allow your natural system to work. And then what'll happen is it'll push or pump more caffeine into your system and not get the most benefit out of it. So it's just a bit of education about what affects and when to take it. So going into the circadian process, or process C, also known as the circadian rhythm or internal body clock. This regulates sleepiness and wakefulness throughout the day and night over a 24-hour cycle. So the circadian rhythm is a biological rhythm, or biological rhythms or biological variations that occurs in a regular time sequence and is based on internal timing. Circadian rhythms are created by natural factors in the body, but also can respond to signals from the environment, such as light, so that we remain in sync with the planet's rotation. So process C, therefore, controls the timing of the sleep and coordinates the light-dark cycle of day and night. It also regulates our other bodily functions, including feeding, body temperature, blood pressure, blood sugar, general alertness, brainwave activity, and hormone production. And these are all on this basis. So if the body has a regular rhythm to it, then the body works more efficiently and doesn't get stressed. When we go against a circadian rhythm, such as shift work or travel over time zones, it stresses the body because now we're doing stuff out of the normal routine. If you, for instance, are doing exercise and you do the same amount of exercise every day, your body is used to it, and then it's not stressed. But if you don't exercise and then you do heavy lifting, it can stress the system out because you're not used to it. So if the body's goes with the circadian and the yin yang, and it doesn't have to adapt to change, then it's less stressful for the body. It can conserve energy and it doesn't stress the system out. So in humans and other mammals, the master circadian pacemaker is located in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus. So all forms of light, as we see on the diagram here, both natural and artificial, affect our body clock. As when the photosensitive retinal ganglia cells in our eyes detect light, they send this information to the SCN, or the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So this light is sent in, is basically telling us to be awake. And this coordinates the timing of biological events such as hormone release, body temperature, sleep, and digestion by taking in this light. And then what happens is when this light comes in, it goes to the pineal gland and it tells the body how much melatonin to release into the system. So for instance, in the morning, we're going to see on the next graph, melatonin is very low because the light is high. And then at night, when it starts to get darker, melatonin is released. So a person's circadian rhythm is strongly influenced by their environment. So anything that disrupts the circadian rhythm and melatonin releases, such as time zone changes, mental health issues, medications, pregnancy, lighting, whether you nap or not, fluctuating work schedules. These are all things that can throw off the circadian rhythm because they can affect the melatonin production. This retinal ganglia cells have been found to be particularly sensitive to blue light with a short wavelength of 480 nanometers emitted by most computer, smartphone, and tablet screens. So exposure to a lot of this type of light in the hours before we go to bed has been proven to suppress the melatonin levels, making it difficult for us to sleep. And in the course, we go into more detail about this, but at least gives you an idea. So melatonin is a hormone secreted by the brain's pineal gland. Levels rise in response to darkness or less light being received by the SCN. This works together with the circadian rhythm to prepare your body to transition between wakefulness and sleep, and vice versa. If light is detected by the SCN, it will delay the production. Not time for bed. When it's darker outside, your body secretes more melatonin. I feel tired. I feel drowsy. It is naturally released around 9 p.m. in the evening, and it builds up from 9 p.m., an average person, till around midnight, where it's at its highest. And at midnight, melatonin starts to decline and ceases around 7:30 a.m. in the morning. Oops, I'm missing a picture here. It might come up later when we talk about cortisol. So we have, so at midnight, it starts to decline. So we have to go with this natural timing. So we talked about having a cool environment, doing yin activities, and now we're going to talk about other things like lowering the lights, avoiding bright lights. And this is all about the yin and the yang, but also about circadian rhythm and the sleep homeostasis. So process S causes a pressure to fall asleep. We talked about adenosine. Process C dictates the daily rhythm of sleep. So tip number 13, limit technology use, especially several hours before bed. And the reason is this blue light goes into the SCN, tells us to be awake, you know, this scrolling around, this high activity of the brain affects us. Even if the light's on in the room, it affects us. So limiting technology use, and this is based on yin and yang, it's based on circadian rhythm, it's based on sleep homeostasis. But here, more about circadian rhythm. Skip the nap. Why do you want to skip the nap? Well, what happens when we sleep at midday? We have this, and of course, there's been shown benefits of napping and so forth like this, and this is true. If you can nap at the same time each day, and you're getting enough sleep at night, and you keep your naps, and there's research that's going to be shared with you, if you keep your naps to a short amount of time, you know, like a 20-minute nap at the same time of day, every day, then it can be beneficial. But most people are not napping at the same time of day, and it's going to throw off their circadian rhythm. And so, yes, it can be beneficial, and research will show it can be benefits to what you're able to do. But most people are sleep deprived. So if you get a little bit of sleep when you're sleep deprived, it's going to increase performance. Because people don't have a regular schedule, I would not recommend it, because it can throw off your whole sleep schedule and your circadian rhythm. And this adenosine pressure, I need to sleep, I need to sleep, I need to sleep. And then what you do, you sleep for a nap, and that pressure goes down. So then later on, when you're supposed to go to sleep at night, the pressure isn't as much, and you don't fall asleep, and you have trouble getting to sleep. All right, just checking, see if there's any questions coming in. All right. So regulating your body temperature. So we can use this system of hot and cold and balance to help us in clinic. So for instance, in Chinese medicine, I remember when I was in China, one of the things you would do is, my friend had trouble with insomnia, and we'd go to get our feet massaged, which is like kind of the calf down, and they'd soak our feet in hot water, like this herbal wash, and massage our feet. And there's research I have on reflexology and acupressure as well for helping sleep. But this idea of this kind of ancient way of warming water on up to the ankles to help sleep. And then there's modern research about having a hot shower and it relaxes us and so forth. What they actually find is it's all about your core temperature. So your body should cool down at night. So by having something warm, it actually causes you to be warm, but then it causes a drastic drop in your core temperature, which then helps you sleep. So it's actually, the warmth causes cooling. So if you have it too close and too hot, too close to bed, it can actually stimulate the core temperature to be up, and the person could have trouble falling asleep. And I've seen that happen when I've suggested it in clinical practice, especially with someone with a lot of heat in the system. So you got to be careful. Maybe it's 1 or 2 hours before sleep. And there's research on this as well. But there's also things like, if your feet are too cold that night, you can't fall asleep. And so this regulation of the yin yang and temperature, if you're too hot or you're too cold, affects your ability to sleep. So regulating your body temperature, you can do different things where we have the yin cool environment, but you also can use warm things to heat up the body to help relaxation. If it's causing the person to have trouble to fall asleep, you might want to back it up. Instead of like half an hour before sleep, you might want to do it several hours before, an hour or two before sleep. A nice foot soak, listen to some relaxing music, do some meditation, etc. But once again, this has to do with the circadian rhythm and the temperature. So circadian rhythm, and naturally the body cools down. So here you're using something external to stimulate the internal. I got half an hour left. Basically, eating and drinking better is, there's different studies about which foods might help sleep and so forth. But basically, you don't want to eat too big of a meal too late at night. It's one of the worst habits we have in modern society, of not eating enough all day and then eating a huge meal late at night. We talk about it more in the course as well, but it basically affects this ability for yang and yin to unfold it, and it's stimulated. So basically you're doing a yang activity. Bigger meals should be had earlier in the day and the more yang time, not at the yin time. So eating too late can affect your blood sugars. Eating too much sugar can affect, your blood sugars, or drinking late can cause you to have to wake up to urinate. So all of these factors. So eating and drinking better in general, and not too late and not too heavy of foods is important. If you've ever fasted before, you also know that if you're too hungry, then you also can't sleep. So it's a balance between having enough nutrition in your body and not too much. So tips for circadian rhythm: sleep consistency, don't nap, electronics, blue light before bed, no. And blue light comes in from the sun, right? That's the natural blue light, which is normal. And during the morning and so forth is great. Having lights when you wake up, or this morning sun. blue lights repeated there. And then watch for lights in your sleep. If anything in your room, even if you're not conscious of it, can affect your sleep. So next we have cortisol, stress, and sleep. We'll talk about this more in the course. If I do invite you to come back in a couple of weeks where we're going to talk about COVID insomnia. I'll talk about the main mechanisms. We'll go into this a little bit more in detail. We go into great detail because COVID insomnia is an increase in stress level of people, similar to like divorce, death, major illness, crucial life changes, all can affect sleep. And the current pandemic, as I said, is causing insomnia in more than 50% of people. And throughout the pandemic, you know, people have had maybe just a little bit of an intro here. So I'll kind of give you a brief, which, like I said, we talk about more in the course, but throughout the pandemic, basically people have had experienced more unfulfilled desires than usual. And this has had an extraordinary global impact due to the shifts in our daily lives, feeling of loneliness, job losses, lack of physical exercise, isolation from family and friends, financial difficulty, grief or death of loved ones, you know, watching the news and getting stressed out about that. Another consequence of the pandemic and isolation and so forth is an unusual amount of time together in confined spaces. So we're seeing less people more of the time in confined spaces, and it's not our choice. So this has led to increased risks of conflicts and domestic violence. And then this is also due to these conflicts and the violence has led to more divorces, which is another source of stress and trigger for mental health problems, including depression, anxiety, and insomnia. Also, on the other hand, human beings are social beings and they naturally desire social connections and to connect with others in deep connection. So with restrictions in society, this led to mental health problems that can be caused or triggered by this. And for Chinese medicine, this has caused the qi of the liver to be stagnant. As I mentioned, you know, research has demonstrated that this form of isolation, it can be associated with cognitive impairment, reduced immunity, increase of cardiovascular disease, and ultimate immortality. And this research was all done prior to COVID. As society became more isolated and less community oriented, they found that these risks, like in the 90s, are doing research, some of the research on this that's mentioned in the journal article, where they were studying like increase of mental health problems, insomnia, etc., due to non-connections of humans. When we're humanly connected to other, our body relaxes as well. So it's a very healing thing. So when we're not connected, you know, causes problems. So in the past and in traditional cultures, all any adult needed any time was food, clothing, and shelter. So anything above this is considered desire. So these desires don't need to be fulfilled, but if an individual has a perspective that it should be fulfilled, then it becomes stressful. You know, I need to have this. You know, I need to have this now. This is further exacerbated if we have not learned healthy ways to process our emotions and stress. And we're not doing activities that promote the flow of energy. So the stress causes energy not to flow. If we don't know how to adapt to this, then it doesn't. Some ideas of, we're going to talk about some ideas of how to move the qi later on to deal with this in a healthy way. Cortisol, we can just introduce it here. We talk more in depth about flight or fight response within the course, and even maybe the next seminar we'll talk about it more. And I keep pointing to that because, you know, we're just limited with time. And there's much to say about this, but it's often called the stress hormone. And it's a key component of the body's natural flight or fight response. And in this modern world, this can be constantly activated. So it's set up as our body, that this flight or fight was set up by in our DNA, so that our ancestors could, when something came up, they could survive basically. So it gives you the speed and endurance to escape these life-threatening situations. like in the last year, with you're under this this fear, or this fight or stress of the pandemic and what might come or what might happen, etc., then the body is the cortisol is more released under these stressful situations. It also, if a person harbors resentment or fear, anxiety, or worry about daily events and relationships in modern society, this happens, and that can cause the body to release more cortisol. And the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis acts to release the cortisol into the bloodstream. So cortisol is essential for these daily functions, just like qi is, for instance, but blood levels of cortisol can vary throughout the day, and they follow a diurnal rhythm and can be released through exercise. So they work in contrast in some ways, but together with melatonin to regulate sleep and wakefulness. So here's our diagram I was talking about earlier. And here we have, if we see here, if we look at melatonin first here, we see at around 9 p.m. that it's low and it starts to be released. And then around midnight, it reaches its peak. And then in the morning around 7:30, it stops being produced. Okay? So you can think of it as more yin. You know, it comes on in the night, it builds, and then it starts to decrease the melatonin. So that's why I sometimes do melatonin supplementation, but when would you take it, you know, to get maximum benefit? What does it help do, etc. So when it's darker outside, your body secretes it, makes you feel drowsy. But then when the sun's coming up, it goes away so that you can wake up, basically. And then you see cortisol is, see what color here, cortisol is around midnight, starts to build in the body. Okay, and then around 8 in the morning, 8:30 in the morning, it's at its peak. So that's why not having coffee before then, exercising around that time is beneficial, because that's the natural cycle of the cortisol. But it should be low at night. So some people that wake up after midnight and they have restless sleep from midnight on, it could be because the imbalance of the hormones of the cortisol, or they're stressed during the day, like from the liver point of view, waking up between 1 and 3 a.m., can be due to the cortisol levels. They're stressed. They aren't managing their stress during the day. They're not exercising. They're drinking too much caffeine or whatever it might be. It's affecting their hormones, and now they're waking up the second part of their sleep. So getting better stress management can help regulate this from a modern medicine point of view, but also from a Chinese medicine point of view. As you can see, there's much to talk about here. All right, just give me a second here. I'm trying to get off of the thing here so I can flip my slide. So high levels of cortisol, the more stress people have or perceive they're having, the greater the amount of cortisol in the system. It's harmful if it's maintained at high levels in the bloodstream for too long, and it causes numerous health problems: obesity, blood sugar, diabetes, muscle tissue, bone density, digestive, stroke, high blood pressure. And it also lowers your immunity. So if you're higher stress or you're not sleeping as well, then when you get a vaccination, for instance, it's not going to work as well. But it also can lower your immunity. So in the time of pandemic, important to get proper sleep. So what's the connection between cortisol and difficulty sleeping? Does too high a cortisol cause insomnia, or is high cortisol a result of lack of sleep? And basically, it's both. It appears to be both. If you don't sleep well, your cortisol levels are up. If your cortisol levels are up, you don't sleep as well. So it's both. Similar to in Chinese medicine, if your liver qi is not moving well, it can cause you difficulty sleeping. And if you have difficulty sleeping, then you get stressed more easily and your liver qi won't move as well. So it's the same thing. Just from a very practical point of view, if I didn't sleep well last night, if I have stress today, I'm not going to handle it as well. My cortisol levels are going to be up, or my liver qi is going to stagnate. I might be more irritable or impatient, etc., because my liver qi is not moving well because I didn't sleep as well at night. If I have a very stressful day, I might not sleep as well at night. So it's this reciprocal relationship between the two. In Chinese medicine, stress equals unfulfilled desires. And the liver is the temperamental organ. And adults blame the liver. So in the next seminar and in the course, we talk about how to identify this. We apply it to clinical cases. So what symptoms would they present with? How do we treat it? But now we're focused on what tips we can to do this. So being the temperamental organ, it's typically the first organ negatively affected by mental emotional stress, and it's particularly susceptible to thwarting of one's desires. So if the liver's function is negatively affected by frustration, suppressed emotion, or stress, and stress is basically desiring to do more than one can in any given situation. This liver's function of promoting the coursing and discharge, or the movement or free flow of energy, is affected. This is so common in adults that there's a TCM phrase, and adults blame the liver. And this is just to talk about the importance of the diagnosis and identifying this pattern as being part of it. So no one adult can fulfill all their desires at the very moment. And then so most adults we see in clinic have some form of liver depression, chi stagnation. So the effects of stress on the body and causing liver depression, chi stagnation has been documented in Chinese medicine for several thousand years. Now, John Chen, who's done a lot of work, Dr. John Chen wrote a pharmacology book and done a lot of work with YouTube and a lot of research on COVID, says that there's been 320 large-scale epidemics in China in the last 2,000 years. So the Chinese have documented not just these epidemics and how to treat them according to the Shanghanlan and the Wenbing, etc., but they've also saw the stress of what stress is caused by war, what stress is caused by famine, what stress is caused to people, that survive an epidemic, meaning they don't get it, but their family dies. And I think it was Zhang Dongjing during his time, 80% of the population was wiped out by epidemics. So there was people left over in the stress of this. So there's been this documentation over time. But basically the liver's first affected by emotions and stress. And it's because the main function of this liver is to help the body to adjust and adapt to both environmental changes and physiological changes in the body. So as the pandemic, if you can go with the flow and move with things and accept things as they are, then you wouldn't be as affected as much. If you're controlling and need things a certain way and, have much desire or attachment to things being a certain way, then your liver chi is going to stagnate more. And that's going to affect your sleep often and your mood and etc. And it's often combined, or is always combined with other patterns, but it's part of it. So this comes from Will McLean, who is co-author of the Clinical Handbook of Internal Medicine. Any phenomena that impacts on the body's ability to adapt to change is registered as the body as stress, with a clear physiological result. These include activities that disrupt the internal clock, that run counter to millions of years of evolutionary adaptation to various rhythms of the world. So our body is meant the yin-yang harmony of the body, the circadian rhythm, the sleep homeostasis is set up a certain way. And if we go against that natural rhythm, it's the body's registers it as being stress. Simple activities that are not thought to be stressful at all can produce measurable physiological stress. So these include staying up late at night, processing information, watching TV, staring at a computer, when the body is trying to shut down. The natural movement is to shut down. We are going against the natural movement. It stresses the body. In many cases, stress is interpreted by the body as an accumulation of many small and seemingly trivial activities, any one of which causes no problem. But these small things accumulating over time causes problems. 15 minutes left here. I want to open it up for questions, and I can stay a little bit longer if needed. So when this liver chi comes in, it causes stress. If a person's unable to cope, they often will self-medicate. If this pressure of stress builds up too much, it can lead to addictions, which have increased since the pandemic. It can lead to suicide, which have increased during the pandemic. Now, some of these self-treatments can also lead to to making choices that help move the qi: alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, marijuana use, other drug use. And these things are enemies of obtaining a restful night's sleep. So they get the stress, they can't deal with it, the chi is not moving, they choose these other things. These other things harm sleep more. If their sleep isn't as well, cortisol levels go up, they're not able to handle more stress, and then they need more of the substance they're craving for the addiction. So this is the problem. Now, acupuncture is really great. What acupuncture does is moves the chi in the body. So it can help move it in a healthy way. And essential oils also can be very helpful. And based on research in China, I've come up with a formula for, I have a recipe formula that I use that includes lavender, frankincense, sweet orange, rose oil, sandalwood, agar wood. And this is going to be available through the Journal of Chinese Medicine, or is available. We'll send you some information after the seminar that you can purchase through that. But it's something that some of my patients use it in their mask, or putting a couple drops on the pillow, or using it in a diffuser. It can be used for depression, anxiety. It's called peaceful night's sleep. But some of these things are known. Of course, the smell and the brain, and aromatherapy is not new to Chinese medicine. And this is a great way where the patient can give themselves treatment. They can use it with meditation, relaxation as well. So it's a good way to move the chi, and these herbs in there are moving the chi, helping the mental, emotional. I'm going to skip through here, but basically modern society is built on having and wanting more. And so the pandemic has caused a situation where people can't have all their desires like they used to fulfill. They can't travel as much, etc. And this can be the first time for people in modern society and privileged societies to have this restriction. And so it's very difficult, and they don't have the resiliency, the ability to cope. And that can cause imbalance in the body and lead to trouble sleeping. Daily progressive muscle relaxation, tightening and relaxing muscles, starting at the top and going down, is effective from a Chinese medicine point of view. When we get stressed, we tighten up. The tendons and ligaments have to do with the liver. We stop breathing. We hold our breath. It stops the chi flow, which causes us to be more stressed. So daily progressive muscle relaxation is very good to help relieve that. And there's lots of research that show that it's very helpful for sleep. So it helps move the chi in Chinese medicine. Expressing your emotions and needs. This is important. So the liver has to do with this suppression of emotions and not expressing how you're feeling and what your needs are. So doing different things that help you express your emotion needs, whether that's therapy or just working with your partner or journaling or writing letters, these also can help sleep. Managing your stress better. So different research is showing doing a worry or gratitude journal for 15 minutes before sleep, you kind of get your worries out. There's research you'll see on anxiety and worry and stress management that shows how stress affects your sleep and some things that you can do. Meditation, mindfulness. I try not to get too esoteric, like you should do this type of exercise or that type of exercise. Regarding exercise, the best is cardio and vigorous. Most people that are interested in alternative medicine, even alternative medicine providers and students, they might do yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong, but they don't do cardio. And so I'm always pushing people, you can do those other things, Tai Chi, yoga, etc., but you need to do cardio. Half an hour every day or every other day of cardio, getting the heart rate up, moving that chi is much more beneficial. People don't move their chi enough. Doing these other relaxing things are good and help you adapt to stress, but you need to move the chi. So the worry gratitude journal before bed can help you get rid of these worries. All right. And like I said, not checking your phone in the morning can be a way of not causing you to be anxious. Anxiety and depression are related to insomnia, higher rates in these two. So doing some things for that is important. And bring joy to life. So when we have stress, our chi doesn't move, and joy relaxes and moves the chi. As adults in modern society, and even myself, we become too serious about everything. We don't enjoy life. And so I often prescribe to people in my practice more and more, where's the joy in your life? Where's the passion? Just don't think of the stuff you have to do. Think of the stuff you want to do. And that moves the chi. So very often I talk to people about bringing joy into their life. Oh, what's your favorite thing to do? Oh, dancing. When's the last time you danced? Oh, it's been 5 years. Like this is, it affects us. So bringing joy to life. And that's therapeutic from a Chinese medicine point of view. And move your chi. So different things can help move the chi. Music, laughter, singing, dancing, chanting. These are all using the breath and moving and bringing enjoyment, but also sex. Sex is a way of moving the chi, and has an orgasm has a way of moving the chi. Often in Chinese medicine, we're negative. Well, it borrows from the essence and this, that, and the other. But there's great benefit to sex. And some not having enough sex doesn't help the chi move, and it brings up unfulfilled desires, etc. Of course, too much and being addicted and so forth has negative, but moving the chi through sex is shown to be beneficial for sleep. So, laugh more, sing more, dance more, more sex, less alcohol, less caffeine, less drug use, exercise, more light during the day, less light at night, you know, bring in a yin environment, yin activities at night. So this is all about balancing all of these things. And like I said, in this research package that's going to be uploaded to the Journal of Chinese Medicine, there's over 300 articles, links to 300 articles. You have plenty of information to delve deeper into these things. So this seemed like a whirlwind of things going. There's a lot of information to cover. Yeah, and many people know what they need to do. I would just, start small with attainable steps that they can do. That's what I would say. Don't overwhelm the patient. And the reality is, when you're treating with Chinese medicine, you don't need to change a lot. You just need to treat them. And using Chinese herbal medicine as my main treatment, also some acupuncture as well, will often improve where they don't have to change a lot of things in their life. But some of these things are helpful. Sometimes they get in the way of promoting. Some of our patients are, as a general thing, are drinking less and smoking less and doing some of these things less than the general public. Yeah, so we do have a bit of time. If there's any questions, like I said, I'm happy. I know our allotted time is coming to an end, but I'm here to answer some questions, and we can open up the mic for Charlene. If it's okay, I can stay like 10 minutes longer or something, and we can have 15 minutes of question. I know I've ran up against the time already. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely fine. I was just going to say thank you so much for all of that information and your wonderful presentation. I'm sure everybody can agree with me. That was hugely interesting and enlightening. We do have a few questions in the chat box that are unanswered. If you don't mind, spend just a couple of extra minutes.
Yeah.
So I'll just go from the top. Vina asked, what might be the relevance of the mechanism of cocoa/dark chocolate, thinking of recommendations for anemia?
Yeah, so there's going to be different subtypes of insomnia, for instance. And so a person with anemia, the most common symptom of anemia is tiredness. So often in Chinese medicine, it's spleen qi is weak, and then there's also blood deficiency, often of the heart. So in these patients, we want to maybe nourish more and make sure they have certain dietary things in place. But I don't replace food for Chinese medicine. There's many herbs that are very good, like Yijiao Tong, Xuanzao Ren, that are very good at nourishing the blood. So as a Chinese herbalist, I would rely on those more than I would food. I would generally look at the proper nutrition for the patient, and certain things that build the blood, whether that's greens or beets or so forth. And I would pick certain things that don't have caffeine in them, because I wouldn't want to, affect other elements. So that would be, I wouldn't use necessarily those things to build anemia. I would use Chinese herbs. And that heart spleen deficiency, if you look at research about the most predominant pattern, it's one of the most predominant patterns. 25% of cases in Chinese research have that pattern. So it's important to treat that pattern, but I would use Chinese herbs, not food. And if you're using, if it's a source of caffeine, then I wouldn't use it.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question. Since COVID, have you experienced an increased amount of symptoms like tachycardia, breathing problems at night, keeping from people from sleeping well, even in patients who have not been diagnosed with long COVID?
Yeah, I would just say mostly the general population. I'd actually moved from the West Coast to the East Coast during COVID and back and forth, and clinics were shut down, but it's just mostly mental, emotional. So it's basically, from my perspective, it's not creating different patterns. It's increasing certain patterns like spleen deficiency, liver qi stagnation, and it's stressing already existing patterns within the patient. And so that can show up as more anxiety, more depression, trouble sleeping, and it can show up as other things. I've treated people that have had COVID before or suspected and have these things, and I've had other people not. But it could be the anxiety that's causing them to have those breathing problems and so forth. So I would just say in general, if like 60% or 70% of people had difficulty sleeping that came into my clinical practice before as an adult, now it's like 95%. Most people have difficulty sleeping. So it's a very high rate now.
Thank you. Another question here. Many of my patients know what helps them, like meditation, sport, diet, less alcohol, nicotine, etc., but they don't have the stamina to keep doing all those things for a longer period of time. Once they break their routines, they completely lose it again. What could I tell them / give them to help them with their perseverance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is my general approach to clinical practice, which is I don't get people to change things until I help them. So I first prove to the patient that I can help them through use of Chinese medicine, Chinese herbal medicine, acupuncture. And once I prove to them that I can help them, then I might get them to change these things. I don't go into they talk about traditionally, change diet and lifestyle first. I don't agree. In modern practice, we need to help the person first, gain their trust, and then teach them. So if I give I had a patient yesterday, and after 1 week, if you're using customized formulas, after 1 week, you're going to see a difference. So if the person is sleeping better, they have increased energy, and some of their other symptoms are less after 1 week, after a month or 6 weeks, they're going to be feeling a lot better. And at that point, they're ready to make changes. So my emphasis on getting the proper diagnosis and the treatment. Once I get that, I can help the patient. The herbs and treatment is much stronger than these lifestyle things. So even if they have these lifestyle things in place that are unhealthy, the herbs and acupuncture are strong enough to make an effect where they start to feel better. Once they start to feel better, they're going to listen more. So that's my advice is, yes, if you just change diet, it might take 3 to 6 months to see a difference, and people want results and they will not stick with things, right? Provide them treatment, eliminate their problems, and then teach them how to prevent and maintain it so they can eventually come off treatment from you is the goal. But other people have said sleep hygiene and so forth is important, but it's like a person that goes to the dentist and has a cavity. You can teach them the dental hygiene and prevention, but they also need a dentist to deal with the cavity. So when a person comes in, they're out of balance, they need help getting into balance. Then you can teach them to prevent them from coming back. So I really like that analogy. And that's my focus. A lot of people teach other things, but that's not what works in clinic for me. Prove to the patient, learn your diagnosis, learn your treatment. That's what the course is about. And then do these preventive things, developing the routine, etc. But first, prove to the patient you can help them. So I think that's what our role is, Anne in that.
Thank you. I think we've got to the end of our questions. We just have a lot of thank yous. Great presentation, very clear and comprehensive information. Unless anybody else has any last questions for Rob, I think that will be it.
Yeah. If you want to verbally ask a question instead of writing it, we can open up. You can raise your hand as well, and we can answer it. If not, I invite you to, there'll be some information coming your way, and delve into that. If you feel inclined to come back in a couple of weeks to listen to an intro specifically about COVID insomnia and specific, we'll continue the conversation about different mechanisms to look for. And then from there, there's a course as well, and there's also mentoring, or if you have patients that need consultation, I'm happy to consult on cases as well. I'll include in the handout some private, like my email and so forth. You can contact me. And as I said, JCM will be have the essential oils available as well. So we can just kind of continue this conversation and learn together as we go along here. And hopefully, some of these things, you had a lot of great ideas at the beginning, but maybe you have some understanding of why, exercise at this time, why to do foot baths, why not to have blue light. I believe I've given you the background. So any tip that you hear now, these are the main ones you're going to come across. Any tip you hear now, you can look at the circadian rhythm, sleep homeostasis, yin yang, the liver's effect on moving the qi, cortisol. These are the reasons why you do or don't do something with sleep tips. So regardless of what the tip is, you can put it into the framework that you learned today and learn more. And I really encourage you to learn more about mental health because of this. Like I said, don't underestimate how devastating, or the ability of this stress to cause imbalance. I would say 90 to 95% of diseases that I've saw since 1998 are due to stress and unfulfilled desires. And the pandemic's just basically made it worse and more severe. So it's a really important thing to know how to treat and to help people that are suffering with these chronic problems that will be showing up at our clinics. So I encourage you or challenge you to learn more about this to help your patients.